Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope this finds you doing well. And in today's video, I want to give credit where credit is due and to bring to light a man who is not well known. And his name is Charles Taylor. Many of you have heard of the Wright brothers, who flew their powered airplane in Kitty Hawk in 1903 and was the beginning and start of aviation. We see planes that take off and land every day, and it's so commonplace. But there was a time where it wasn't so common. It all started somewhere in those early days. And the story of the Wright brothers is quite remarkable, and I read this book by David McCullough, The Wright Brothers. If anyone hasn't read it or perhaps is interested in aviation and history, it is a great read. And David McCullough captures a lot of the things that is not well known, such as Charles Taylor, and even the Wright brothers' sister, Catherine, who is very integral into the Wright brothers' success. And a lot of people don't know much about her or the Wright brothers' family and where they came from. And it all started here in the state of Ohio, where I'm recording this. And Dayton, Ohio, which is south of me, is where history started. Going back to Charles Taylor. Who's Charles Taylor? Well, he built the engine on the Wright brothers' plane. And it is quite remarkable. A man like him, who, like a lot of people, was self-taught, like the Wright brothers were. And he grew up in a humble family, pig farming, and had his own machine shop. Got to know the Wright brothers through his wife's family. The Wright brothers was renting the building that was related to Charlie Taylor's wife. And so the Wright brothers hired Charlie Taylor. And he did a lot of things in the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur Wright's bicycle shop. It's a remarkable story in how he built the engine from scratch. And so I will play this bit of a documentary. I'm not going to play the whole thing, and I will post it in the description if you're interested. It's not very long, but I think it is quite fascinating to learn. We hear about the Wright brothers and flying their plane in Kitty Hawk and all of that, but what I find fascinating, there's a lot of folks in the background that we don't always hear of. And Charles Taylor is one of those people. And a sad thing about him is that in 1956, I believe, he passed away destitute. Did not have a lot of money, and he ended up, separating from the Wright brothers later on to go take care of his wife. Moved to California, and later they did come together to move the bicycle shop to the museum in Michigan. But yes, it's a sad story. A guy like him and how integral he was to die destitute. And other famous people like Charles Goodyear. He was the man who learned or developed the vulcanization process for making rubber. He died in debt. Nikola Tesla, this guy here, I didn't know this. He died all alone in a hotel room. And he was another one, just not well understood in his day, who came up with all his, I think he had over 100 patents, Nikola Tesla. And he came up with the AC current induction motor, electric motor. And he had quite a mind, and all his patents and everything. And again, another man who died in debt, you know, and not, he had written some letters that he just felt like he wasn't understood in his time. And then now, of course, you know, we know who Tesla is, and I think that's even it's probably where Elon Musk came up with the name of his company, Tesla. I'm assuming so. But that's the things that I am fascinated by in history. In the Wright brothers' story, there's a lot of firsts. There was a lot of firsts. Charles Taylor, who was the first, they called him a mechanician. He was the first aircraft mechanic. The Wright brothers being the first to, of course, there's some debate on who first flew, but the Wright brothers are the ones who are well known to build an aircraft that can be controlled in flight. I think it was the first controlled flight where they can actually maneuver the plane, was the Wright brothers' claim to fame. So they were the first into doing that. There was a Lieutenant Selfridge, this guy here, who was flying on the plane in 1909 in Virginia. They were doing a demonstration flight for the military, and I believe it was the Wright Flyer 3. It was an improved 5 years later from their first flight in 1903, 1908, 1909. And Lieutenant Selfridge, Orville was flying the plane, and the propeller cracked, and the airplane crashed, and Lieutenant Selfridge was killed. Orville was badly injured on the plane, survived, and was able to then go back into flying again. He almost died. So Orville and Wilbur always said they would never fly together for that very reason. If the plane ever crashed, you know, and they didn't want them to be both killed. So there's always one to carry on the mission. But Selfridge was the first fatality in an airplane. He was the first active duty military member to die in a plane crash. And he was the first person to solo in an airplane from the flight training that was developed back then. So I thought that was interesting. Back in 1907, he was the first person to actually solo fly alone in an airplane. So a lot of firsts, a lot of firsts. And so, but I'm going to just show the main gist of this video, and I'm going to play a clip of this video. Again, I will have it posted down in the description if you care to watch the rest of it. But these folks are talking about Charles Taylor, who was very integral in helping the Wright brothers in their planning, in their experiments. And he was the one who, from scratch, built an engine to power the Wright brothers' plane. So here it is, a little brief history of Charles Taylor.
The story of the Wright brothers, of Wilbur and Orville, was very well known. There was this guy named Charlie Taylor, kind of in the background, who was the Wright brothers' mechanic. People still don't know a lot about him.
He was what they called a mechanician in the day.
He was a genius model maker of his own ilk.
He's the first airplane mechanic, really. Charlie built the engine that was on the Wright brothers' 1903 airplane.
Telegram from Kitty Hawk had a special significance for the mechanic who worked in the Wright's bicycle shop, Charlie Taylor.
Of course, I was greatly pleased to know it had been accomplished, but at that time it didn't seem to be anything wonderful at that.
He was born in 1868. He didn't come from an affluent family. Probably not a lot of education, definitely not higher education.
He was a hog farmer in Indiana. He taught himself the rudimentary mechanical skills needed by a farmer.
He came to Dayton because his wife's family was in Dayton. He worked for a couple of smaller manufacturing places and decided to start his own machine shop. The Wright brothers rented a building for a cycle shop from a relative of his wife's. So that's how he got to know them.
He got tired of running his own shop, and the Wright brothers hired him.
Charlie became an employee of the Wright Cycle Company. He could make things, he could use things, he could adapt things. He was Mr. Fix-It, I guess you could say.
He took on any task, no matter what was required of him.
He became a close friend to them.
The Wright brothers financed all of their aeronautical projects from the bike shop.
I started on repairing bicycles back in the 80s, and then I later went to Dayton and built bicycles. I got acquainted with the Wrights, and I built bicycles for them. I did all the repair work while they went down to Kitty Hawk to try out their gliders.
One of the first jobs related to flight that Charlie was assigned was airfoils. How do we get the most lift? A wind tunnel was not a new idea, but the Wrights didn't have one. And so, Charlie, you're the guy who can build this stuff. When the brothers came back from Kitty Hawk in 1902, they started researching, how do we make it fly now by itself? We need an engine, it's got to be lightweight. We need this much power.
They sent out about 13 tenders saying, can you build an engine of this weight, this RPM, and nobody could do it.
Industry was not interested in building one unique engine. They were into mass production.
So they turned to Charlie.
Charlie said, yeah, I can build one.
Charlie helped them figure out, what material do we use? I believe it's aluminum because it's lightweight.
He constructed the engine all by hand.
I made all the different parts in the motor. I even made the crankshaft. So I made it out of a solid block of steel, cut it right out of the solid block by drilling holes and knocking out large pieces out of it, and then turning it up in the lathe.
Charlie actually built the engine in 6 working weeks.
Charlie built them an engine that actually gave them more than what they asked for.
So what did you think of that? Now do you have a better idea of who he was? What an interesting story. And Charles Taylor is buried at the shrine. I think it's called the Shrine of the Folded Wings. I think they said it. Well, I will show you another clip that will tell you where he's buried at. It's called the Shrine of the Folded Wings, and that, or Portal of the Folded Wings, Shrine to Aviation in Burbank, California, is where he's buried. And so I will show you a clip of that.
Wright brothers went to Kitty Hawk in the fall of 1903 to test this airplane with an engine. And it's a complete success. But now they know they've got to come up with something that's going to work in Dayton, Ohio. So in 1904 and 1905, the Wrights are using Huffman Prairie as their local testing ground. Charlie was out at Huffman Prairie a lot. They'd say, Charlie, this is not working right. How do we fix this? What do we change? They have improved the plane so much that in October of 1905, Wilbur takes off with a full tank of gas and he flies around Huffman Prairie. He's got a controllable, sustainable, practical airplane. And the Wright's patent for their control system was not awarded until '06. And so it was after that that they started promoting the airplane and trying to sell it. In the 1930s, he comes back to Dayton to help Orville work with Henry Ford when they actually moved one of the cycle shops to Greenfield Village. Charlie was invited to come, and he actually worked for the Henry Ford Museum to tell the story of the Wrights and what had happened and the significance of it. And I think that was probably a really happy time for Charlie. He was back with Orville. They were tinkering, they were doing things with their hands, they were doing something they loved. When that ended, Charlie left, he went back to California. Charlie, at the end of his life, is very poor. He cannot support himself. He's taken in by another couple. When Orville dies in 1948, Charlie can't come back for the funeral. He's named an honorary pallbearer. He eventually becomes so ill that he passes away in 1956. Charlie's story is kind of sad because not a lot of people remember him by this time. But you think about the amount of time that Charlie lived through. Charlie saw so many changes in aviation, and it had to be gratifying to him. Charlie's story is important because he really was the first airplane mechanic. He took on that role without any training, without any formal education for it. Charlie was the first person to develop this as a skill set.
He was just a genius. Very few people know about him.
Where else could you find a story about a guy who runs a pig farm and then decides to go build airplane engines?
The Portal of the Folded Wings is a monument to early aviation pioneers, and Charlie is buried there. He's not remembered as well as maybe some of the other people who are there at the Portal of the Folded Wings, but hopefully we can change that in the future.
So there you have it, Charles Taylor. And I will end this video of a video clip of the Wright brothers. They are flying in Virginia. This was in 1908, 1909. Clip of them in, I always forget where in Virginia. It's Fort Myer, Virginia in 1908. And this is where Orville is flying the plane, and Charles Taylor, or not Charles Taylor, but Lieutenant Selfridge, Lieutenant Thomas E. Selfridge, and that's where that tragic crash occurred. But this is some colorized footage, and I just love it. And this was, 1908, 1909 footage of them demonstrating the plane to the U.S. military. And I think Orville and Wilbur were demonstrating the plane for a military contract. And but it's just so fascinating to watch, and how they're pulling the airplane out of the building, which would now be considered their aircraft hangar. They had some ground handling equipment, a wheel that they were connecting to the plane to wheel the aircraft out. So you had your first ground handling equipment and flight and crew on the ground. And it's just fascinating to watch and to see them taking off and flying in a circle in that plane. And imagine that. And my grandfather was born in 1907. So my grandfather was, just a little baby when all that was happening. And I just love this film, and I will end the video with that. And you can just watch it and just take it all in, and how that's where history was changing right then and there. And you see in the background the horses. So you have this clash of still horse and buggy and infancy of so many technologies, from the camera that's being used to record them, which is fairly new technology. You've got this airplane in its infancy as they're still learning how to make these things, these flying contraptions fly, still in its beginning stages. And you see the gentlemen in their, even the Orville and Wilbur Wright in their suit and tie, jacket and hat, and the way that they were dressed and carrying themselves. And they were, slender, trim. You don't really see a lot of overweight people back in the day, and it's just a different time, and I soak it up. And so I share it with you, just a walk down memory lane, a bit of nostalgia, remembering where we came from. When we see these planes flying over day in and day out, all the thousands of planes that take off and land each and every day, it all started right here in this video. And I'll end it with that. And what's truly fascinating to me is how the people that developed this stuff, so many of them were so self-taught. No advanced degrees. Taylor, he didn't have any formal training to do that. They just used their head and came up with it and designed it and made it. And a lot of the farmers, growing up here in Ohio, a lot of the farmers, the local farmers, my neighbors, were the same way. If they didn't have something, they built it. They built it themselves. Some of them with only a 10th grade education or even less than that. And I can remember Edwin and Henry, they lived right down the road from me. Still, they had no indoor plumbing when I was growing up as a kid. They still had outhouses, an outhouse in their home. And when you'd go down there, you had to go use the outhouse. And they got their water from the spring. So I remember that as a kid, and even as a teenager. They still continued to live that way. But Edwin and his brother, they were very good with numbers. They had their own little machine shop in their barn area, and could make things. And so a lot of those people from that time were so ingenuitive, and they could build things. They were self-taught. They read books. Orville and Wilbur Wright were the original homeschoolers, and the parents that influenced them to learn and have intellectual curiosity. And again, they didn't have any advanced degrees, no degrees in aeronautical engineering, and we put so much stock in today's world, on what you've got hanging up on your wall, and I graduated from Harvard, I'm from an Ivy League school, and this and that and a third, and a and a ho-ho-hum, and we just think, just how important it is because they have 3 letters by their name, PhD, doctor. And then you've got Charles Taylor, Orville and Wilbur Wright, didn't have any of that. And look at what those guys did. They're the ones who changed the world. And I learned something from that. And I think that we think less of ourselves sometimes. I don't have the training. I don't have the right credentials. I don't have this and I don't have that, and how we just don't think that we have the ability when you've got people like these folks. They figured it out. They learned, and we've got libraries now, information, and we too can use our heads, our ingenuity, and just imagine what we're able to accomplish if we put our mind to it, if we so choose, and create something absolutely from scratch that hasn't even been made before. And it's out there. It's out there. If we took the time and to learn and to study and use this, it's amazing, I think, what we're able to accomplish But I think nowadays, in today's world, we've got all these distractions. We've got these. You know, how many people actually sit down and read books anymore? Not many people. And we're so distracted with so much now in entertainment, bread and circus, all of that. And I think we're losing a lot of our creativity that our previous generations, our ancestors had. And so many people from that day, and they were good with figures and arithmetic and could figure things out and use things like a pencil and paper. Imagine that. Paper and pencil. Back to the basics. Arithmetic, numbers, penmanship, writing, use of the English language, reading. It's dying. It's dying out. And those Wright brothers, their writing, their correspondence, you've got people who graduate from colleges now, master's degrees, who couldn't write like the Wright brothers could. Their penmanship, their writing, from my understanding, was absolutely superb, top-notch. And that the Wright brothers' dad taught them to be able to use the English language in written form and on their feet. And now you've got employers who are hiring college grads. They've got to send them to a writing course because they can't even write basic things. And I think how sad that is. And now and very little knowledge of history. It's really really sad time. And I think I don't think really we can't put a lot of stock in pieces of paper. Oh, so what that they have a degree in anything. And I don't think it really amounts to much anymore. And I think the real true unsung heroes are those that are self-taught, that go off and do their own thing and create their own. And you've got them even today. I think Elon Musk is like that. He's not a college grad. Sir Richard Branson, the Virgin Galactic, he's not a college grad. High school dropout Steve Jobs, who came up with Apple, he didn't have a college education. He would drop in on classes that interested him. And I think there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for that. And to do things on your own and follow your own path instead of following everybody else. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I'm gonna quit chatting, quit talking, and I'm gonna end it on this 1908-1909 airplane flight of the Wright brothers in Fort Myer, Virginia. Enjoy. Anyway, I hope I gave you something to ponder, and you learned about Charles Taylor, something new that's not always known in our history. So anyway, again, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one, and safe flying out there.